America is standing at the edge of a cliff, but while the media and political elites distract you with endless noise, a much more dangerous reality is unfolding. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans anymore. It's about a system that has turned its back on its own citizens for the sake of profit. The American dream is slipping away for many, replaced by automation and outsourcing. The divide is growing, and the consequences are dire. But there is still hope if we act now. The US dollar, once the king of global currencies, is in decline. Countries around the world are actively moving away from the dollar in favor of other currencies, leaving the US more vulnerable than ever. But while the economic walls are crumbling, our government has a plan to keep the wheels turning, and it involves you, your job, and the flood of undocumented immigrants crossing the border. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is happening in real time, and it's about to get a lot worse. You see, it's not just about illegal immigration, or even just about the economy. It's about replacing you. Across America, local workers are being replaced by migrants willing to work for less, and companies are receiving tax incentives to make sure it happens. Think about that for a second. The government is handing out tax credits to companies that are bringing in undocumented workers to replace American citizens. In Alabama, for example, entire workforces are being replaced, and the state is offering incentives to make it happen. This isn't just happening in Alabama, though. This is happening across the country. And it's not just one political party to blame. Both Democrats and Republicans are complicit, and their silence speaks volumes. Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, and World Relief. These are organizations you've heard of before, probably in the context of helping the needy. But what you don't hear about is the millions of dollars these organizations receive to facilitate the influx of immigrants into our country. The same organizations that preach about charity and kindness are profiting off the crisis. They receive government funding to assist in resettling migrants, while communities are left to deal with the economic and social fallout. The jobs you once had, gone. The neighborhoods you grew up in, changing before your eyes. And the people in power, they want you to think this is all part of the natural order of things. But it's not. It's by design. The de-dollarization of the global economy isn't just an abstract concept. It's a very real threat. Countries like Russia, China, and even Saudi Arabia are making moves to distance themselves from the US dollar. Once the backbone of global trade, the dollar is now being pushed aside. And as that happens, the economic power of the United States weakens. This isn't just bad news for Wall Street. This is bad news for every American. Inflation, job loss, rising costs of living, it all ties back to the decline of the dollar. And while this economic storm is brewing, what does our government do? It opens the floodgates, letting in waves of cheap labor while offering companies tax breaks to replace you with someone who'll work for a fraction of the cost. You have to understand, this isn't just incompetence or mismanagement. This is a calculated plan. They want you distracted by partisan politics while they re-engineer the workforce right under your nose. Illegal immigration is being weaponized. The companies benefit from cheap labor, the government hands out incentives, and the American worker is left behind. And those who should be holding the line, the so-called humanitarian organizations, the ones you might have once trusted, are profiting from this chaos. Let's talk about Alabama. Workers there are being replaced at an alarming rate, and it's not just happening in one industry. This is widespread. Poultry plants, factories, construction sites, migrant workers are filling positions that used to be held by local employees. And why? Because they will work for less. And the companies love it. Instead of paying fair wages to American workers, they bring in undocumented workers at a fraction of the cost, all while pocketing tax credits for doing so. It's a win-win for the corporations and a lose-lose for you. Think about it. How does it make sense that while millions of Americans are struggling to find work, the government is incentivizing companies to hire undocumented workers? It's not just betrayal, it's a deliberate strategy. As the US dollar continues its decline, the government and corporate elites are positioning themselves to profit off the chaos. Meanwhile, you're left with rising inflation, job insecurity, and a future that seems increasingly uncertain. And it's not just about the jobs. The social and cultural fabric of America is changing, and not by accident. The influx of undocumented migrants isn't just an economic strategy. It's part of a larger plan to destabilize communities. You see it in Alabama, you see it in New York, you see it in California. Neighborhoods are changing overnight. Crime is rising, resources are being stretched thin, and the American middle class is being pushed out. This isn't just a border state problem anymore. This is coming to every town in America. The so-called young global leaders, a group tied to the World Economic Forum, are driving much of this agenda. These are the same elites who have a stranglehold on global politics and economics. They're the ones pushing for open borders, the ones advocating for the replacement of American workers with cheaper labor, and the ones who benefit the most from the de-dollarization of the global economy. And they're not hiding it anymore. They're operating out in the open, and they're counting on you to be too distracted by partisan bickering to notice. This is bigger than any one political party, and it's bigger than just America. The global elite have been planning this for years. They know that the decline of the US dollar is inevitable, and they're positioning themselves to come out on top when it all comes crashing down. And while they're securing their wealth, they're leaving you to deal with the fallout. You might be asking, what can we do about it? The first step is understanding what's really going on. This isn't just about illegal immigration or economic decline. This is about the dismantling of the American workforce and the erosion of the middle class. The people in power don't care about you. They care about their profits and their power, and they're using every tool at their disposal to keep you distracted and divided while they carry out their plan. It's important to recognize the scale of what's happening. The de-dollarization efforts by countries like Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia aren't just headlines. They're coordinated strikes against American influence. As these nations step away from the dollar, the value of the US currency declines, weakening our purchasing power and putting more strain on the average citizen. Your paycheck buys less every day, yet the government turns a blind eye, focusing instead on bringing in undocumented workers to replace you and your neighbors. This is not a mistake or miscalculation. This is the plan. Think about the industries most affected. Agriculture, manufacturing, construction. These are the backbone industries that built America, and they are now being hollowed out in favor of cheap, replaceable labor. In Alabama, hundreds of workers in poultry plants have already been replaced by undocumented workers. These migrants, who often come here seeking a better life, are being exploited for corporate gain. And who is behind it? Both political parties, various global organizations, and the corporate elites who profit from every tax break, every loophole, and every piece of legislation that furthers their goals. We've all heard the term globalist agenda, and it's easy to dismiss as some fringe conspiracy theory. But let's be clear, this isn't a theory. Look at the facts. The World Economic Forum openly pushes for global governance and a restructuring of the labor market. The Young Global Leaders program has placed key players in influential positions, from CEOs to politicians. These are the people shaping policy, and they're doing it with a focus on global markets, not on American citizens. In fact, their agenda doesn't include you at all. Their goal is a borderless world where labor is cheap and easily replaceable. And guess what? It's working. We're already seeing the effects across the country. In California, entire industries are shifting to a labor force made up of undocumented workers. In New York, hotels once filled with tourists are now packed with migrants, supported by government contracts. Meanwhile, local residents are being priced out of their own cities. The average American is becoming an afterthought, while the elites continue to profit. Even humanitarian organizations are part of this machine. Catholic charities, Lutheran social services, and other groups are receiving millions of dollars in government contracts to resettle migrants. They present themselves as saviors, but the truth is, they're raking in profits while communities are left to deal with the fallout. Ask yourself, why are these organizations, which claim to be focused on helping the needy, so heavily involved in resettling migrants? It's because they're being paid to do so. And it's not just a small operation. This is a nationwide effort. In town after town, state after state, American workers are being replaced, and American wages are being driven down. And here's the kicker. The government isn't just allowing this to happen, they're incentivizing it. That's right, tax breaks and credits are being handed out to companies that hire undocumented workers. It's happening in industries like construction and manufacturing, where the American worker is already struggling to compete. And it's happening in agriculture, where American farmers are being pushed out by large corporate farms that rely on migrant labor. This is not just economic mismanagement, it's a betrayal. Now, let's bring it back to the dollar. As the US dollar continues to lose its status as the world's reserve currency, we will see an acceleration of these trends. Inflation will skyrocket, job security will evaporate, and the divide between the elite and the rest of us will grow wider and more permanent. But this isn't something that just happens overnight. It's happening right now, step by step, as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. And make no mistake, the government and the corporations are preparing for it, while you're left to fend for yourself. There's a reason why countries like China and Russia are working so hard to ditch the US dollar. They know that once the dollar loses its global status, America's influence, and the American standard of living, will decline rapidly. But instead of preparing the American people for this reality, the government is more concerned with bringing in waves of undocumented workers and giving tax breaks to corporations that outsource jobs. Here's where the call to action comes in. First, you need to pay attention. This isn't just about immigration or the economy. This is about the future of America and your role in it. It's time to start asking the hard questions. Why is our government so eager to replace American workers with undocumented labor? Why are we giving tax breaks to companies that profit off this chaos? Why are we being left in the dark about the decline of the dollar and the rise of globalism? It's time to stop relying on mainstream media, which is complicit in this agenda, and start looking for the truth. Share this video with everyone you know, because the more people who are informed, the harder it will be for the elites to carry out their plan in silence. Secondly, get involved in your community and demand accountability. This isn't just happening in Washington, D.C., it's happening in your town, in your state, in your workplace. Attend local government meetings, challenge your representatives, and demand answers. If we don't start holding the people in power accountable, they will continue to walk all over us. The clock is ticking, and the American dream is slipping away with every passing day. Let's take a closer look at what's happening in Alabama. In Coffee County, there's been a surge of migrant workers replacing local employees in key industries. Poultry plants that once employed hundreds of American workers are now staffed primarily by migrants. And what's the government's response? Incentivizing the companies to make these changes by offering tax breaks. The companies save money, the government gets cheap labor, and the American worker is left jobless. This is happening in real time, and yet it's being swept under the rug by both political parties. Because at the end of the day, it's not about left versus right, it's about profits, and those profits are being made at your expense. Now, let's zoom out and talk about the broader picture. As the dollar weakens, the US economy will continue to shift. The decline of the dollar isn't just some abstract economic theory, it's a reality that's unfolding right now. When the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency, the consequences will be devastating. We'll see a massive spike in inflation, a collapse in the job market, and a further erosion of the middle class. But instead of addressing this looming crisis, our government is focusing on bringing in more cheap labor and incentivizing companies to replace American workers. It's not just short-sighted, it's deliberate. The global elites, including the World Economic Forum's young global leaders, are driving much of this agenda. These are the people who are pushing for open borders, a global labor market, and the decline of American sovereignty. They don't care about your job, your family, or your community. They care about profits and power. And they are using every tool at their disposal to ensure that their vision for the future comes to pass. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's happening right now. And while this is going on, the mainstream media remains silent. They are complicit in the gaslighting of the American people, telling us that everything is fine, that immigration is a positive force, that the economy is strong. But we know better. We see the reality in our communities, in our paychecks, in our everyday lives. The truth is, the American dream is being sold out piece by piece, and unless we take action, it will be gone forever. So, where do we go from here? We're facing a perfect storm, a crumbling dollar, a flood of cheap labor, and a government more concerned with corporate profits than with protecting its citizens. But we still have power. The power to act, the power to hold those responsible accountable, and the power to fight back against the global elite's plan to dismantle the American workforce. The American people are not powerless, but it requires us to see beyond the partisan distractions and recognize the larger game at play. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about the survival of the American middle class, the survival of the American dream. The time to act is now, not later. If we continue to sit on the sidelines, we will watch our country get hollowed out from the inside. The global elites will continue to get richer, the corporations will continue to grow more powerful, and the average American will continue to be squeezed until there's nothing left. It's time to wake up. Look at what's happening to our economy, our jobs, our communities. Illegal immigration isn't just a border issue anymore. It's an existential threat to the American workforce. The de-dollarization of the global economy isn't just some far-off event. It's happening right now, and the effects are being felt every time you go to the grocery store or pay your bills. But here's the thing, they're counting on you to do nothing. They're counting on you to be too distracted, too divided, too disillusioned to fight back. They're counting on you to keep voting for the same politicians who are selling you out. They're counting on you to believe the lies coming from the media, the lies coming from the so-called humanitarian organizations, the lies coming from the people who benefit from your silence. But we can change that. The second call to action is simple. Get informed and spread the word. Share this video, have the conversations, start pushing back against the gaslighting and the deception. Let your friends, family, and community know what's really happening. The more people who know, the more difficult it becomes for the elites to keep hiding behind their smokescreens. Now, the third and final call to action: demand change. We need to hold our leaders accountable at every level of government. Don't just wait for the next election. Start demanding answers now. Challenge your local representatives. Demand transparency from the corporations profiting off this chaos. And most importantly, refuse to be silent. We still have a voice, but we need to use it before it's too late. This isn't just about politics. This is about the future of America, the future of our children, the future of everything we hold dear. Let's be clear, the stakes have never been higher. This is about whether or not America survives as a nation of opportunity, freedom, and prosperity. This is about whether or not the American worker, the American middle class, can still thrive in the face of globalization and corporate greed. And it's about whether or not we allow ourselves to be gaslit into submission, while the elite continue to strip away everything we've built. We can still turn this around, but only if we act now. Only if we stop waiting for someone else to fix it and start demanding real change. This is your country, your future, and your fight. The global elites may have their plans, but they don't control us. Not yet. But if we don't push back, if we don't fight for our rights, they will. And the America we know will become nothing more than a memory, lost in the pages of history. So stand up, get informed, take action, and let's start holding these people accountable before it's too late. Share this video, get involved, and let's make sure the American dream doesn't die on our watch.